A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend, Constitutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Leonard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Constitutionalist Podcast. We were supposed to be talking today with Johnny B. Good. Hey, wasn't available, so we have to settle for Ken W. Good.
A distant cousin.
Yeah, it's a joke, people. It's just a joke. Seriously, very much looking forward to talking with Ken W. Good, since I and his team connected earlier this month, the month being September. We are recording Monday, September the 29th. I say that for behind-the-scenes purposes. And welcome to the show, Ken W. Good.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I've heard all the good jokes you have. I've heard the Goody Two-Shoes, Mr. Goodbar. People, even though there's no E on it, people call me Mr. Goad. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you added that to show you have a sense of humor, right? And I'm sensitive to names because I'm Joseph M. Leonard. It looks French. It's not Leonard. It's Leonard without an O. And I have to put my middle initial in there like you do too. You know, a last name that's similar in any way to someone else, you need the middle initial, because there is a Joseph Leonard out of South Carolina that's also an author. So
I put my middle initial because if you just put Ken Good, it sounds like canned goods.
Another good joke. Yeah. No, that's great. Well, with the W in there, if they miss the G, they may think you're associated with Kenwood Trucks.
I've been called Ken Wood before, so that's not anything new either.
So, all right, wasted enough time, but my audience knows I can never pass on whatever lame puns can be worked in. And indeed, if we can't make fun of ourselves and our names, we shouldn't make fun of anyone else. But before we get to the why are you here, let's get into the who are you? Where were you born and raised? Where are you now? That sort of thing.
Okay, so my name is Ken Good. I am, I say this with trepidation, I'm 64 years old.
I just turned 63 this year, so.
Yeah, so I'm a year older than you. I was born in Texas. I was born in this little town called Anson, Texas, which is north of Abilene.
And you don't have any of that accent still at all. No.
Yeah.
We're laughing
None.
for the benefit.
I'm working on it. I'm trying to decrease a little bit, but
for the benefit of the transcript, we're laughing. We're laughing. Okay, go on.
But I grew up in Texas. My parents were public school teachers. They taught us the importance of an education, but we grew up in a really small town. I mean, a town where everybody became ranchers and farmers. Nobody went to college. I had 24 people in my high school class, and I think 5 of us went to college. And I think that's changed since then. But I mean, that was back in 1979. But my mother and I always watched Perry Mason late at night. At that time they had the news on Sunday night, and then they have news extra or sports extra from 10:30 to 10:35, and then from 10:35 to 11:35, which was late even for us, we would stay up and watch Perry Mason. So I always had a dream of going to law school. And I would say it was a dream. It wasn't a goal because I really didn't understand goals at that age. And so I really didn't, get in the first time I applied because I worked almost full time. I graduated from college in 3 years instead of 4, and I worked. And so my grades reflected that you can't do both full time. And so I got a master's degree. I taught high school for 2 years, like my parents did. And then I went to law school. And so I loved law school, loved everything about it. I was on law review. I was on a lot of national team speaking events. It's just kind of where I clicked. I was just very blessed. And so, but also kind of naive. I think one of the running jokes when I first got there in law school was that, Brennan had been on the U.S. Supreme Court for so long, he had been appointed by Abraham Lincoln. And it took me several months to work out in my head the numbers to realize that there was no possible way that Brennan had been appointed by Abraham Lincoln. And so I was like, oh, that was a joke. Okay, I'm just naive. I didn't realize it. So, I graduated from law school in 1989. I moved to Tyler, Texas. I was working for a large firm that had a Tyler office. And so I've worked there for like 12 years with the same group of guys. The guys, the person responsible for teaching me how to practice law. And so I started kind of specializing in the area of bail law. I am Texas counsel for several companies, and I'm on the board of directors of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. I'm on their legislative team. I testify and help influence bills at the state legislature. And then there was this case that was in Houston called O'Donnell versus Harris County, and someone asked me to go to one of the early hearings in that case. And let me just say, this was the seminal case. At one point, it was cited across the country as the case that we're doing bail all wrong, and we need to reform it. We need to have criminal justice reform. And I came out of that hearing scared because I thought the judge was going the wrong way. I thought she was applying the law incorrectly, and I was worried. And because there was no one telling the story from the industry's perspective, and I thought everything that was being said was, untrue.
Well, you're kind of now starting to get into the why you're here. Yeah. So before we do that, two things popped in my mind while you were talking. First being, and relax, people, I'm just having a little fun here, right? The first thing was the Jim Carrey movie Liar, Liar comes to mind.
Yeah.
Right? We won't hold against you. You're a lawyer. And
I will say this in response to that. The best compliment I ever received by my daughter was that, they read To Kill a Mockingbird in school. And she told me that the whole time they were reading it, that she saw me as the lead character. And, my wife is an attorney, so we have a lot of attorneys, and my 2 children are very smart. But I remember that as one of the best compliments I've ever received. And it also scared me, because how do you live up to that?
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. And now a third pun comes to mind, right? There are, playing off your name, both good and bad attorneys, right? Good and bad cops, good and bad in everything. And the other joke that came to my mind was while you were saying, as you testified, so you're a snitch, eh?
Well, I used to say, I used to hear you couldn't afford an excellent attorney. You got stuck with a good attorney. And then I had a professor in law school. Her name was Phelan. And then I had another attorney that was an associate when I first started practicing law, and her last name was Dick. And I kept saying that the 3 of us should start a law firm together, and we would be feeling good, whatever. And it was, I thought, for just the name alone, we would make a fortune.
But now the 3 Stooges, what was that? The 3 Stooges? Pardon language.
Cheat 'em in hell.
I'm going to need to cut that. I'm going to have to cut that little part out because I went a little too PG-13 that I usually do on this show, G-rated. So, note to self, edit. People will probably guess what I said, but at any rate, indeed, the why you are here is the bail reform movement, which perhaps there should have been some, in my opinion, also, let me just say it up front, went way too far, and the murder recently demonstrates that.
Well, and what I was saying was, I got involved in this area specifically as a result of going to see a case. And I think I've been proven, my concern about that case has been proven true, because that case is now, the judge has been overturned 6, 7, 8, or maybe 9 times in that case. And in a subsequent proceeding, the Fifth Circuit ruled that case should have never been filed in federal court. And at one point it was cited across the country as the case for bail reform, and it's now been overturned. And so that's what got me started in this specialty area of writing articles. And I've written numerous articles across the country about criminal justice reform, and specifically about bail reform.
Yeah. And this being a Christian show, I believe in forgiveness, but like Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica Kirk, I forgive him. That's what we're supposed to do as Christians. But there's a but. There is a however. There is the rest of the Bible in context needed there. That doesn't mean, skip the trial, let them go free. No, that's not what that means. Inherent in the forgiveness is the hope and the prayer that they see the light. They're willing to admit their faults, their crime, their wanting to repent and reform. Otherwise, indeed, earthly justice does need to still continue and prevail. And indeed, if no remorse shown, the Old Testament was not completely erased by Jesus. You need to follow the whole context of the New Testament to understand where parts were indeed removed, but some stand, like Genesis, Leviticus, and Numbers, the death penalty. Thou who sheddeth man's blood shall have by man his blood is shed. The death penalty applies, but the murder we're talking about is the Irina Zarutkas, and I apologize if I get that name wrong, right on the New York subway, where someone slain her, not with a gun. It's not the inanimate objects issue here. It's the evil human who, in that case, used a knife. Banning assault trumpets, to go back to Jericho, right? The walls of Jericho came down because of trumpets instructed by God. Should the Jericho survivors, to, mitigate their feelings, ban assault trumpets? Right? The idiocy of the inanimate object blame is ridiculous. But yeah, the person who murdered Irina had many offenses where he should have been locked away. The murder would have never happened. Same with Kate Steinle, same with Molly, same with, those were illegal aliens in that case, or illegal immigrants.
Well, we're
in those
getting
cases,
more and more examples of these things. I mean, look at Charlie Kirk. I mean, my family and I are very strong Christians, and so we have a firm foundation in the Bible, and we have a good relationship with the Lord. But, we're supposed to give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That doesn't mean we give up public safety because we're Christians. We're not supposed to turn the other cheek and say, okay, there's no consequences. I mean, and, we live in a time where people take advantage of your Christian faith, and they'll use it against you. And we see that. Look at what Charlie Kirk did, and how he was just going to college campuses because he cared for youth of America, and he was just having a civilized conversation. But that's not the way it was portrayed. It was portrayed in the news that he was a hate monger, and that as a result of that, someone decided that they needed to end his life because he was full of so much hate, which could not have been further from the truth. Now we have examples of, because of the hateful language, people are, we have a guy that showed up in Dallas just last week and started shooting at the ICE facility. And the very first thing on the news you hear is that he's a right winger, possibly, because the people that got shot were ICE detainees. And what they don't report is how many times he was shooting. It was just scattershot trying to get anybody. And he ended up shooting the very people that he thought he was helping.
Yeah.
That's a good example of criminal justice reform, bail reform across the country. Even if you want to argue these are well-intended people, I'm not sure that that's true for their whole coalition. A lot of times the very people they hurt are the people they claim that they're wanting to help. So, the 50% of all murder victims in the United States are young black males, and by and large, the people that kill them are young black males as well. And so somehow in this whole debate,
Oh, you're not allowed to talk about that. That's an
we're
inconvenient
favoring
fact.
the young black male murderers over the young black male victims, and
Yeah.
that's turning everything on its head. It's just
Absolutely.
it's crazy.
And yes, literally, I said we're recording Monday, the 29th of September, just yesterday also. And of course, they're trying, it's
Sure.
got to be a right winger shot
Yeah.
up an LDS and
Sure.
set fire to church in Grand Blanc, Michigan. No, these are left-wing radicalized people, and the evidence shows it no matter how much. And for any and every Timothy McVeigh, which I'll concede as a right-winger, example you could legitimately give rather than lie like you are about these cases.
Well, but
I've got 9,999 examples of the other.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.
But the party has moved so far to the left that they have created this rhetoric that causes people who listen to it and have mental issues to think that they need to do something about it. I saw a good article, I think yesterday as well, summarizing and even showing a speech from President Clinton, probably an address to a joint session of Congress where he's talking about illegal immigration. And the comment was made that speech today would be labeled hate speech and would be labeled MAGA.
By the left.
And so it's the incredible part of it is if you want to just enforce current law, you're now a radical. And I think there's a reason for that. The reason for that is the Democrats like to say that everybody's a threat to democracy, but all they're really saying is they're a threat to the Democrats because they can't win. Yeah, their power. They can't win without doing these type things anymore. And that's where we are. And so we have to reckon it. We have to call it. When something doesn't work, we have to call it. We have to change it because they're never going to admit to it because they need that anger. They need illegal aliens in the country so they can get more power for the blue states.
You've raised many issues I want to touch on. Indeed, it's all about power and control for the left. What is good for their power and control, nothing about what's good for U.S. citizens. And Matthew 7 is really condemn not lest ye be condemned, final judgment reserved for the Lord, right? That doesn't then eliminate worldly and earthly justice. You mentioned turn the other cheek. I talk all the time. It doesn't mean read the whole Bible, always be a sucker. It's not what Jesus is saying. And render unto Caesar the other of the several most warped and twisted scriptures from the Bible. And you kind of raised the question, right? Yeah, all this rhetoric brings up the hypothetical, if you had a time machine and could go back and kill baby Hitler. Well, you can't prove a negative. What if you did go back and kill baby Hitler? It could have been worse if Himmler or Goebbels.
How would it have changed? The German public voted and approved every change that Hitler wanted until he took mass control. But I mean, they suspended the Constitution. So what makes us believe that someone else would not have just stepped into that movement?
Exactly my point. Himmler, Goebbels, somebody else, potentially even worse, who may have not as been as insane, may have been still evil, but more normal thinker, might have prosecuted that war to a point where they won the war and more people could have died.
I mean, do we really want, I mean, are we at the point in this world today where we say that Hitler was crazy and that's how we justify what he did? Because I could make a bunch of arguments that he was just a very smart politician, that he blamed and pointed the public's anger.
Subculture, yes.
Yeah, he scapegoated the problems that were going on in Germany as he rose to power effectively. And I would say that to some extent we have that going on in the United States right now, where we're scapegoating problems or we're ignoring problems and we're blaming everything on a group. And right now it's
victimhood mentality, and the whole victimhood mentality, and so many, and there are some on the right that are anti-Semitic. I'm not claiming there aren't, but this is not anti-Semitism movement on the left.
This is not a situation where it's both equally bad. It's not. I mean, we have too many examples. How many times has, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, we can count on, both hands and go to our toes examples of where people have been, listen to this rhetoric where somebody's Hitler, I mean, every presidential candidate since Eisenhower on the right has been called Hitler. And now they're saying, oh, it's just worse now. Well, no, when everybody's Hitler, then nobody's Hitler. And, they keep making these analogies that why the right is Hitler. The next person who runs for president is on the right is going to be worse than Trump, is going to be Hitler, because that's what you do when you can't make an argument. When you cannot respond on the merits, you go to name calling, you go to toxic language, you go back to identity politics that says, don't listen to you because you're a racist, so I don't have to respond to the merits of your argument. That's identity politics, and we're getting away from that. We need to do it more.
Yeah, and I, like Greg Gutfeld the other day said, I've always had the philosophy, yes, call people fat, call them short, call them, I've called people names, absolutely, but it pales in comparison to you constantly trying to call us racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, this, that, and the other, worse than Hitler, all that stuff, because you cannot have a policy discussion. You will lose that every time.
Well, and part of the problem is with the policy discussion is I think that the left has outsourced their policies on criminal justice reform, bail reform. They've outsourced it to the Soros groups, so they can't get involved in discussion because they'll lose their support. So they and the advocates on their side will never admit it's not working. They'll always say we need more time. They'll point to these pseudo studies that they even had their own groups write. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if every time you hear something from the Brennan Institute talking about how crime is going down or it's not being increased because of bail reform or criminal justice reform, that's just Soros's groups trying to support what they're doing. And
fudging the numbers. I have a piece on Before It's News about that. Yes,
absolutely. They used to write, "Oh, you don't have to believe just us."
Classifications. That you Soros DAs pleading away the gun. You claim to care so much about gun violence, but then you plea away the gun charges so you can let the criminal back out on the street with a lesser plea.
Well, I mean, we just had an example of the New York DA where he dropped charges on a left activist for attacking a right activist. And so, I mean, that would never happen if the roles were reversed. And when that's the standard, if you apply that as the standard, they're doing something because of the left versus right. If they wouldn't do it because it was right versus left, then it's politics. And politics have gotten too far. We always have politics in these discussions, but it's gotten too far. When you can't even admit that you've got criminal, illegal aliens in the country, then we can't have a discussion. We can't have a compromise with you.
It's gone from reasonable, somewhat honest political discussion to the left being completely delusional, ideological. They refuse to recognize and admit to reality. You can't have a discussion with someone who doesn't have an equal basis in any form of reality. Now, back before the bail reform and the need to undo that, because this relates. Rudy Giuliani broken windows policy. It relates directly to the bail situation. If you arrest, prosecute, and put away people for the smaller crimes, people don't usually go from 0 to murder. Some do, but most, right? If you show criminals you're soft on criminals, they've got no reason to stop committing crimes, and majority of the crimes are committed by a small number. If you locked up that small number, indeed, most crime would evaporate overnight, yes?
Yes, we have the same small group of people committing probably 60 or 70% of a crime in an area. And I agree with that. The broken windows theory is a proven theory for fighting crime. I mean, it's not something that was created by Rudy Giuliani. It's something we teach in our colleges, in our criminology classes about how to fight crime. The reason why it was attacked in New York was because it was so effective.
And he had an R by his name.
Yes, and he had an R by his name. But because it was so effective, they filed suits. And, you know, what people forget or don't know is ultimately the use of the broken windows theory was upheld in court, but that was many years after it had stopped being used. And, you know, we've got a push now to try to bring it back in certain areas, because look at Portland, look in Seattle, where, you know, the president just called out the National Guard, or I guess the Secretary of the Department of War just called them out. But Trump is sending troops into that area because Antifa has taken over that area. They were like, oh, we don't have a crime problem. No, you have. You've turned over. You are allowing Antifa to decide what takes place in your city, and you're bowing down to them every day. I mean, we had that happen in Seattle in 2020 because of George Floyd. They had the chop zone where they just blocked off this area and they wouldn't allow the police to come in. And so, I mean, there's been studies of that. And for that 20-something days, crime increased 178% compared to other areas. And even in the 2-block area around it, crime was up like 70-something%. And then the whole precinct area, crime increased 25% over those 20-something days. So, I mean, we have laid bare this argument from the activists. We need to, you know, get rid of the police. We'll be safer without police. That's a lie, and there's no science to support it, and which is true for a lot of their criminal justice reform, bail reform movement. And it's finding the truth is very difficult.
Yeah, and other points: New York City and San Francisco Chinatown. There are literally areas Democrats have given over areas to the Chinese government to have their own CCP stations, which aren't upholding American laws. They're holding up the Chinese, you must infiltrate, spy, and report back to China laws.
Isn't that strange how when that story first came out, you were a conspiracy theorist, you were a nut job for even suggesting it. And it took Trump being elected president to come out and admit that was taking place and he was ending it. I mean, isn't that crazy that, I mean, we've gone from, oh, you're a nut job conspiracy theorist for recommending that or suggesting that that's happening to, yeah, it was happening.
Yeah, well, time has flown. I'm going to start. So back to the bottom line, we both agree, and I think a lot of people agree, it's for power and control purposes. Those on the left refuse to deal in the effectiveness of broken windows, as you said, and that no cash bail is a major fail. You keep letting criminals out, they keep committing more crimes. It's that
Absolutely.
simple.
Well, it is that simple. When there's no other release mechanism that performs as successfully as the private industry. So when you try all these other experiments, they fail so drastically because they have such high failure to appear rates. And as the high failure to appear rates increase, you have backlogs in cases. Backlogs in cases put pressure on judges to dismiss cases. When you dismiss a case so there's no consequences on the defendant, they see that as a green light to commit more crime. It's that simple.
Amen. You all now see why we preempted Johnny B. Good to have Ken W. Good.
My uncle would be so proud.
Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for appearing, Ken W. Good. Do you have a website for people to find and reach out and all that good stuff?
Sure. For more information, they can go to our website, pbtx.com, which is the Professional Bondsman of Texas, so pbtx.com. We have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice stories, and we also have a podcast. There's a link on our menu, but it's called The Bell Post, so you can also just go to thebellpost.com. And we talk everything criminal justice. I mean, I think we're ranked in the top of the criminal justice podcast.
And also, I see on the email exchange, this is Elliot saying he is MediaVistorPR.com. We don't want people going there. Yeah. So PDTX.com. And what was the other one again? I didn't get to write it down.
Thebellpost.com.
Bell or Bail?
Bail, B-A-I-L.
Okay, there's that that accent problem again, right? The Bail, I'm sorry, I didn't
Post, thebellpost.com.
Okay, that to me, I think is the important one. Thank you, Ken W. Good, for your time. I greatly appreciate it. Normally, I would say, I don't know when this will air. I got a whole lot of interviews over there piled up. It will be a while, but sorry, others. I'm bumping up Ken. This will probably air early October because this is so timely. It has to get out. I will let you know, of course, when it drops.
Thank you very much, sir.
Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help. Thank you for having tuned in for Constitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless.
Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM is your conservative flamethrower. Weekdays, Steve Gruber starts things off at 6 a.m. Gruber gives his perspective on the issues of the day. At 9 a.m., Glenn Beck blazes the airwaves with his nationally syndicated program. From noon to 3, it's Dennis Prager. At 3 o'clock, it's Wham's own Thayrone X. On the Edge, Thayrone tells it exactly as he sees it. At 6, it's The Dana Show, your conservative alternative. At 8, don't miss Joe Pags. Weekends are filled with conservative talk as well. Fingers Malloy, Thomas LeDuc, The Abolitionists Roundtable, A Moment of Clarity with Pastor Rick, Your American Heritage with Ed Bondarenka, Dave Janda's Operation Freedom, and Dick Kupke's Trigger Talk. You can even get links to Wham podcasts from Dave, Dick, and of course Thayrone, all from their pages on our website, whamradio.com. Keep it locked on Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM in southeastern Michigan, and whamradio.com anywhere in the world.